The king of the monsters. I saw another beast coming up out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. Revelation 13. 1. The air was heavy with anticipation as I prepared for the interview. Sitting across from me in the dimly lit room was a man who had clearly seen things he'd rather forget. Smoke swirled lazily from his cigarette as he adjusted his tie, a futile attempt to mask his discomfort. The first landing, he said, his voice cracking slightly, feels like it happened a lifetime ago. Let's begin. I nodded, my recorder clicking on. It all began in Cape Soya, a quiet town at the northern tip of Hokkaido, known for its serene coasts and fresh seafood but little else. It was the kind of place where the biggest excitement was a new flavor of ice cream at the local shop. My family's ancestral home perched on the southeastern coast, close enough to the water that you could hear the gentle lapping of waves at night. Peaceful, sure, but also remote and dirt cheap, which was why the new supersonic train expansion had its sights set on demolishing it. They offered us 10 million baht, the man explained, tapping his cigarette into an ashtray. It was an insult. The union standards dictated 40 million, but they thought they could strong-arm my grandparents into settling for a fraction. Naturally, my grandparents refused. He smiled faintly, as if recalling a moment of pride amidst the chaos. They called me back from North America to deal with it, figuring I'd bring some backbone to the negotiation. I even dragged my mentor along for credibility, brilliant guy, Nobel-worthy, though he'd never admit it. The negotiations were set for that fateful afternoon. The house was a relic of the past, built with sturdy, earthquake-resistant materials, though, as it turned out, nothing could prepare us for what was coming. We'd just sat down when the tremors began, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. At first, it was subtle, like a passing train rumbling in the distance. But it didn't stop. The walls rattled, glasses clinked, and an antique clock fell off the mantel, smashing on the floor. Great, I muttered at the time, they're trying to shake us into accepting the deal. Is this a tactic now? But then came the sound, low, thunderous booms that resonated deep in your chest, like the world's angriest timpani player had decided to rehearse outside. That's when we knew something was wrong, he continued, eyes narrowing. We ran outside, expecting an earthquake or maybe a rogue tsunami. Instead, we saw it. At first, it was just a shadow. A massive shape loomed beneath the water, larger than any fishing vessel and moving with deliberate menace. The dorsal fin emerged first, jagged and towering like a mountain slicing through the ocean. It was glossy black, reflecting the gray sky above, and it sent waves crashing against the shore. People started screaming, he said, lighting another cigarette with a shaky hand. Not that I blamed them. I mean, what do you do when you see something like that? Call animal control. The creature rose from the water, standing at an impossible height, over 200 meters tall. Its skin was thick and rough, like volcanic rock, and its glowing dorsal fins crackled with energy. And then it roared. Skreonk. The sound was not just loud. It was physical. A shockwave rippled outward, shattering windows, knocking people to the ground, and sending nearby seagulls spiraling out of the sky like poorly piloted drones. That roar felt personal, the man said with a bitter laugh. Like it wasn't just announcing its presence, it was scolding us for existing. The air shimmered as the creature opened its mouth, revealing a pulsing blue glow. The light intensified, growing brighter and more focused, until... boom! A beam of plasma shot forth, cutting through the sky with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel and the destructive power of 1,000 nuclear bombs. The city of Grafidamoni, once a shining beacon of offshore engineering, was reduced to a flaming ruin in seconds. The man paused, staring into the middle distance. You ever see a city melt? It's surreal. Skyscrapers turned to liquid. Cars evaporated before the drivers could scream. The air itself felt like it was on fire. Back in Cape Soya, chaos reigned. People ran in every direction, though it was clear there was no escape. The creature's massive tail swung lazily, toppling buildings like dominoes. Every step it took sent tremors rippling through the ground, creating fissures that swallowed streets whole. Funny thing, the man said, a trace of dark humor creeping into his voice. We were so worried about the train station demolishing our house. Turns out, that was the least of our problems. The creature, Godzilla, as it would later be named, surveyed the destruction with an almost serene expression, as if admiring its handiwork. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it turned and lumbered back into the sea, leaving behind a trail of fire and ash. The aftermath was a nightmare. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Over 500,000 lives were lost, with millions more injured or displaced. The city was unrecognizable, a smoldering wasteland that reeked of smoke and despair. They called it the god of destruction, the man said softly. But to me, it was something worse. It was a reminder, a message, that we've overstayed our welcome. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long plume of smoke. And you want to know the worst part? I think it's just the beginning. March 16, 2208. The day humanity learned that it wasn't the dominant force in the universe. The day a sleeping giant awoke, with a single objective, to make us leave. Its name was Godzilla. And it wasn't going back to sleep anytime soon. 0 comments 0 vote. The Awakening. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. Walking in the depths of the ocean, the ancient beast known as Godzilla advanced steadily toward the deep sea. Just like 200 years ago, when it wandered beneath the melting ancient ice caps, Godzilla was in a foul mood. It had only just awakened from its latest slumber, but something unusual nagged at its mind. Strange, foreign information seemed to have been injected directly into its consciousness. As it opened its eyes, taking in the pitch-black seafloor, something peculiar entered its field of view. Host name, Godzilla. Height, 218 meters. Weight, 640,000 tons. Breath, high-temperature plasma. A faintly glowing panel hovered in the upper left corner of its vision. The ancient symbols displayed their detailed various facts about itself. It recognized those symbols. They were the same ones the little creatures had used in their rituals during its 10 prior awakenings. Back then, it resided near the saltier, darker waters of a distant land. Over countless ceremonies, it had learned to decipher their meanings enough to comprehend the information displayed before it now. Understanding the symbols was one thing, but their sudden reappearance was unsettling. Those little creatures, the humans, had perished long ago. Their land had sunk beneath the waves during one of its long slumbers, and with it, those symbols had disappeared. Yet here they were, appearing unbidden in its vision. And what was more unsettling was the task they proposed. It glanced at the lines beneath the glowing panel, where a main mission and several side missions were displayed. Main mission: expel humans from the universe. Damn humans have destroyed the planet's ecosystem. As the representative of this planet, for all the deceased creatures, can you use your atomic breath, Godzilla, to make them leave the universe? Current completion: 0%. Reward: advanced materials, advanced energy sources, planet's ecological restoration. Side mission: the first step in expelling the universe. The awakening of the King of Monsters is accompanied by absolute fury. Destroy any human city. Reward: 1 body strength evolution. Side mission: the benevolence of the King of Monsters. The missions were bizarre. Why were they asking it to destroy those little beings? Godzilla swayed its massive body uneasily before rising from the layer of rock it had been resting on for the last 2 centuries. Despite the ominous directives, Godzilla chose not to act. Unlike its kin, which often showed little regard for other beings' survival, it was different. It was patient. It was a pacifist. As the oldest of the Titans, it had a unique fondness for these little creatures. From its hazy youth millions of years ago, it had borne witness to countless cycles of destruction and renewal, experiencing one mass extinction after another. But it had also observed these tiny beings, humans, create wonders in their brief lifespans that even the ancient Titans could never achieve. Though their existence spanned less than 10,000 years, the amazement they brought surpassed anything it had encountered in the previous 100 million. Their ingenuity had once filled it with hope. And though it grieved when one of their continents sank, it had been comforted to discover their descendants thriving on distant shores. But these descendants, it soon realized, did not share their ancestors' reverence for the natural world. They even dared to challenge it and its kind. Once aware of their hostility, Godzilla and the other Titans had gradually receded from view, letting humanity dominate the Earth unchecked. We are eternal, it had thought at the time. They are fleeting. If they do not want us, we can wait for their end. Swinging its massive tail, Godzilla emerged from the depths of the ocean trench where it had been resting. The waters were quieter than it remembered. The haunting songs of the whales, once so prominent, had vanished. They were gone, just as it feared. That realization filled it with melancholy. It had always enjoyed the singers of the deep. But even before its last slumber, their numbers had dwindled alarmingly. Their extinction now, while saddening, was not entirely unexpected. It swam upward toward shallower waters, craving sunlight after centuries of darkness. But as it ascended, something felt wrong. The ocean was empty. No fish darted in schools, no shrimp skittered among the seabed. Even the resilient coral reefs, once teeming with life, had become barren wastelands. The water itself felt sick, tainted by an unnatural poison. The stench of it reminded Godzilla of the rare luminescent stones buried deep beneath the Earth's crust, stones that had always been deadly to ordinary life. But those stones had once been scarce. Now, their contamination filled every corner of the sea. Godzilla emitted a low, rumbling growl that reverberated through the waters. It was a call, a Titan's ancient language, meant to summon its kin. No response came. It growled again, louder this time, amplifying the soundwaves enough to wake Titans still in slumber. Yet the silence persisted. Not a single Titan stirred to answer its call. Unease turned to dread. Finally, it shifted to a different frequency, broadcasting its voice on the wavelength of nature itself, the oldest and most primal frequency of all. This time, there was a response. But the answer did not come from the world outside. It came from within. The glowing panel in Godzilla's vision shifted, flooding its mind with information. Memories and scenes it had not lived through poured into its consciousness, as though nature itself was sharing its final will. It saw humans capturing slumbering titans, dissecting their bodies to study the mobile nuclear reactors within. It saw humans waging war on awakened titans, killing them with weapons of mass destruction. It saw the humans' victory over the titans lead to civil war among themselves, an endless cycle of nuclear conflict that decimated the planet's ecosystem. For decades, humanity's nuclear war raged on, poisoning the Earth so thoroughly that over 99% of all terrestrial and marine life had perished. Even the insects were gone. Godzilla understood now. The natural consciousness of the planet, weakened and dying, had entrusted its last desperate plea to the sole remaining Titan. Its wish was simple. Eradicate humanity. Not out of hatred, but as a final act of preservation. If humans were allowed to continue, their technology would eventually annihilate every form of life, even the smallest microorganisms. Without life, the planet would become a barren, lifeless rock. For billions of years, Earth had endured. It had weathered mass extinctions and cosmic cataclysms. But humanity's reckless wars had pushed it to the brink. Nature's plea was clear. Exile them all. Leave no one behind. Zero comments, zero vote. Nature had perished. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. Godzilla was deeply saddened by this. Although it was unexpected for humans to kill the Titan monsters, the gargantuan creature could understand it. After all, the Titans had killed humans before. While the Titans were near eternal, they were still part of nature. Conflicts and killings among Titans had occurred in the past. As the king of the Titans, the oldest among them, Godzilla had witnessed the succession and renewal of multiple generations. It could understand the humans' actions, but it couldn't accept them. In the past, at least the Titans had left offspring. There were always next generations. But now, apart from itself, no Titans remained. Even their descendants were gone. Not to mention the Titans, large terrestrial creatures had also nearly vanished. This extinction was more severe than any previous mass extinction event. The world's ecosystem had regressed to a state resembling the Ediacaran period. Through the knowledge imparted by nature, Godzilla understood this deeply. To evolve Titan life again would require immense time and patience. Godzilla was overcome with grief. But then it remembered its control panel. There was still a reward for completing the main mission. Reward: advanced materials, advanced energy, planetary ecosystem reshaping. Godzilla ignored the first two rewards and focused on the last one, planetary ecosystem reshaping. Was such a thing even possible? Godzilla didn't know. The information provided by nature hadn't mentioned this control panel. It hadn't even known this system existed within itself. However, from the human knowledge it had inherited, particularly from the literary works of the Sunrise Country and the Wa Nation, it had read about similar constructs. In those stories, entities like this control panel possessed the power to reshape the planet itself. It could even offer Godzilla the ability to annihilate humankind. But now, it could fulfill the last wish left by nature. Perhaps it could witness the rebirth of the planet. The system offered 5 enhancements for its body: breath, body composition, size, power supply reaction, self-repair capability. Godzilla's current stats were displayed. Power supply reaction, magnetic confinement deuterium-tritium fusion. Dormant power, 10 gigawatts. Active power, 0.5 terawatts. Maximum power, 300 terawatts. Size. Height, 218 meters. Mass, 500,000 tons. Total length, 389 meters. Can be increased through feeding. Body composition, composite armor of carbon fiber muscles, aluminum silicon alloy, and carbon steel. Breath, high temperature plasma maximum output, 280 terawatts. Self-repair capability, 5,000 tons per day. Analyzing these stats, Godzilla realized its body's composition was outdated compared to humans' technology. The combination of aluminum silicon alloy, carbon steel, and carbon fiber armor was insufficient against the advanced weapons developed by humans. A single electromagnetic cannon shot could pierce several meters into its body. While Godzilla's mass could withstand about 1,000 shots before its internal organs were reached, this wasn't enough for annihilating humanity. It needed to become stronger. A new notification flashed across the control panel. Side mission, first step in space rolling completed. Reward, 1 body strength evolution. Would you like to use it now? Note, this evolution will require 48 hours, during which the host will enter the deepest sleep. Please proceed with the evolution when everything is secure. Near the waters off Hokkaido, Godzilla considered its next move. The mission completion had been triggered an hour ago when its plasma breath annihilated the floating city. Now, it was time to retreat. Godzilla, uninterested in a direct confrontation with human forces, descended into the sea and swam toward the depths. Evolution required time. Humans had developed far too quickly during Godzilla's 200-year slumber. They had explored nearly every corner of the planet, even the underwater domains. However, Godzilla still had places to hide, ancient caves carved out for hibernation or the undersea residences built by early humans. The Pacific Ocean itself was its sanctuary. As it descended to the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, it swam toward its old nest. This was a place it had built tens of thousands of years ago when humanity was still in its infancy. The trench was dark and cold, but back then, it had been teeming with life. Now, the abyss was filled with radioactive wastewater, and the once vibrant ecosystem had vanished. Even the smallest plankton had become scarce. The king of monsters submerged to the trench floor, where the immense pressure, enough to crush steel, felt like a gentle massage to its titanic body. Navigating through the murky depths, Godzilla eventually found its old nest. It had been carved out ages ago, back when humans were barely developing civilization. In those days, the trench had offered tranquility, with signals from other beings occasionally breaking the silence. But with time, Godzilla had moved its nest to observe the rise of humans on the surface. It had wanted to witness their growth, to understand their potential. It never expected that the world would change so drastically. Humans had become so numerous that they had driven other species, including the Titans themselves, to extinction. It longed for the past. But it knew that was impossible. Now, it was time to sleep. Settling into its ancient nest, Godzilla closed its eyes and began the evolution process. 0 comments 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Fallen_stone. Download app now. Aftermatch. Human POV. Outside the car window stretched an endless sea of greenery. It might have been awe-inspiring at first glance, but the scene held an eerie stillness. The forests of today, though vast, were hollow imitations of the vibrant ecosystems that once graced the earth. Gone were the buzzing bees, chirping birds, and rustling underbrush of old. Now, the foliage consisted of a single species of plant, lab-grown, uniform, and soulless. The sprawling forests resembled a green desert, lush in appearance but devoid of life. 2 centuries ago, the nuclear wars had obliterated the Earth's original flora and fauna. In the aftermath, humanity turned to science, desperate to reclaim the surface. Resilient plants capable of enduring harsh radiation and the relentless cold of the super-nuclear winter were created and scattered across the planet. Slowly, the land turned green again. But it was a hollow victory. When humanity attempted to reintroduce animals, things quickly went wrong. Herbivores thrived unchecked, reproducing at alarming rates. Carnivores, on the other hand, struggled to survive, often wiped out by starvation or overwhelmed by their prey's sheer numbers. Attempts to build functioning ecosystems failed spectacularly. Eventually, humans gave up on restoring the planet's wild heart. Instead, they created 5 controlled ecological zones, self-contained havens where nature was carefully curated and micromanaged. These zones became symbols of hope and exclusivity, surrounded by wealthy enclaves where only the elite could live. Hideo Takahashi believed in their promise of a better future. Sir, we've arrived, the driver's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Hideo tucked his phone into his bag, glancing one last time at the smiling faces of his family on the screen. Stepping out of the car, he took in the devastation around him. The South Zone, once hailed as humanity's crowning ecological achievement, now lay in ruins. Charred buildings leaned precariously, their skeletal remains jutting out like jagged teeth. The air carried the acrid stench of burnt flesh and the sharp tang of disinfectant, a nauseating combination that made Hideo's stomach churn. The ground was littered with white cloth-covered bodies, their mourners kneeling beside them, wailing in despair. Medical personnel in protective suits moved methodically, carrying unrecognizable remains to hastily erected shelters. For every life they saved, 10 more slipped away, leaving behind only grief. The sight hit Hideo harder than he'd expected. He'd seen the photos, read the reports, but nothing prepared him for the reality of standing amidst such raw devastation. "Are you Mr. Takahashi from the emergency rescue team?" The voice startled him. He turned to see a throng of journalists in radiation suits, cameras and microphones pointed at him like weapons. "Mr. Takahashi, can you comment on the extent of the disaster?" One reporter shouted. "What do you think caused the sudden appearance of the Titan?" Another demanded. Hideo raised a hand, trying to fend them off. "I'm sorry, I can't answer any questions right now. I have urgent business." The crowd pressed closer, relentless in their pursuit of answers. Just as Hideo's patience began to fray, a group of soldiers in military radiation suits arrived, their stern presence scattering the reporters like startled pigeons. "You must be Mr. Takahashi," the lead soldier said, offering a curt nod. "I'm Wei Zhang from the Asian rescue team. Our team leader sent me to escort you." Hideo nodded, grateful for the intervention. Wei Zhang gestured toward a cluster of makeshift tents in the distance. "This way, please. We've been waiting for you." As they walked, Wei Zhang chatted animatedly, explaining the rescue operation's scope. "The South Zone's situation is dire. Our team volunteered to handle it because, well, someone had to. The Americans are handling the West, the Europeans the East, and the local rescue team has the North. But some of the local guys insisted on staying here, said they couldn't leave without finding your family." Hideo's chest tightened at the mention of his family. He managed a stiff nod, unsure how to respond. Wei Zhang's warmth and easy camaraderie took Hideo by surprise. As an introvert from the conservative Far East region, he wasn't used to such effusive friendliness. Wei Zhang, however, seemed unfazed by Hideo's reticence, filling the silence with stories about the rescue efforts and his team's determination. They soon reached the Asian rescue team's base camp, a bustling hub of activity. Isolation tents housed patients rescued from the worst-hit areas. Despite their harrowing ordeal, some survivors were already cracking jokes, their laughter a faint but hopeful sound amidst the chaos. Families reunited after days of uncertainty embraced tightly, their tears a mix of relief and sorrow. The stark contrast between this pocket of life and the death-filled wasteland outside was striking. Hideo followed Wei Zhang to the largest tent, where senior officers and medical personnel were deep in discussion. As they entered, a subordinate spotted Hideo and stiffened. The look on the man's face told Hideo everything he needed to know. "They're gone, aren't they?" he asked quietly. The room fell silent. Wei Zhang shifted uncomfortably, his earlier enthusiasm replaced by a solemn gravity. "I'm sorry," the subordinate said, his voice heavy with regret. "We searched everywhere, but there was no sign of them." Hideo nodded, his expression unreadable. He'd prepared himself for this outcome, but hearing the words still felt like a blow. For a moment, the weight of the tragedy threatened to crush him. But then he straightened, his resolve hardening. There were still lives to save, still people counting on him. He couldn't afford to falter now. "Thank you for your efforts," he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "Let's focus on the survivors. They need us." As Hideo stepped out of the tent, the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the devastated landscape. The world outside remained a picture of despair, but within the camp, a fragile hope flickered. Hideo vowed to nurture that hope, no matter the cost. 0 comments 0 vote. A family never separates. Human Pav. Mr. Takahashi, this is the casualty report up until now. Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Yaro. Mr. Takahashi, another voice chimed in, here are the reports on building damage and evaluations of nuclear radiation intensity. The situation in the southern city district. Is not optimistic. Hand me the data. You should take a rest, Jong. Mr. Takahashi, yet another voice called, more frantic this time, the senator is asking for you. And, Mr. Takahashi. Your wife will definitely be fine. Takahashi paused for a fraction of a second, his fingers brushing the rim of his glasses before setting them firmly on the bridge of his nose. I understand. Thank you for your wishes. I'll head there shortly. The voices kept coming. Mr. Takahashi, what time is the press conference scheduled for today? 2 p.m., he answered briskly. Also, send this disaster report to General Arita. You can all leave after that. It's already late. The silence that followed was weighted. It's no problem, sir, came a soft reply. How could we possibly leave today? And, sir. If anyone needs a proper rest, it's you. You've been, well, let's just say you're running on fumes. March 17, 2208, 4 a.m. The Hokkaido Government Hall was ablaze with light, casting sharp shadows against the walls. The building, meant to close at 7 p.m., had become a hive of ceaseless activity. Fatigue hung thick in the air, yet not a single person faltered. The reports kept coming in like relentless waves. Population survey for the North City District complete. 8,720 deaths and 12,321 missing persons. The tally of affected buildings is finalized. Total: 1,450 completely destroyed, 53,191 contaminated by nuclear radiation. Despite 14 hours of non-stop work, no one grumbled. No one stopped. Each passing minute might mean the difference between life and death for someone out there. Severely affected areas with a high probability of survivors are here, and here. Planning team, we need the fastest rescue routes. We apologize for keeping you all up tonight. A man's voice boomed in response. Takahashi, what are you talking about? As the Minister of Emergency Management, you've been through the ringer more than anyone. Don't worry about us. We've got it handled. After ending the live feed, Hideo Takahashi shuffled out of the projection room. The hallway bustled around him, a frenetic river of urgency, but Takahashi moved like a man dragging an invisible weight. His every step seemed heavier, his every breath a reminder of how little time he had. Stepping into the elevator, he leaned against the wall, his hand briefly covering his eyes. Floor. The operator asked. Top floor, conference room. Thank you. The top-floor conference room loomed ahead, a grim beacon of responsibility. Takahashi pushed the heavy door open, stepping into a room steeped in tension. Takahashi-kun, said a stern voice, you're the last to arrive. Cutting it a bit close. Apologies, he murmured, bowing slightly before slipping into an empty seat. His gaze snapped to the center of the round table, where three-dimensional projections shimmered with eerie precision. The countdown below the projections ticked closer to 0. 5. 4. 3. The room fell deathly silent. As the countdown ended, the holograms flickered to life. They moved with a precision that mirrored the high-stakes tension in the room. Their voices were crisp and authoritative. Senator Amano, began one projection, the committee has decided to halt all trade in Hokkaido's northern port area, designating it as a rest and refit zone for the Indian Ocean Fleet. This will remain in effect until the creature is neutralized. Another figure, clad in the uniform of a fleet commander, spoke next. Generals Luo and Alexei, prepare the port for docking. The fleet will arrive at 2000. All vessels currently docked must be relocated to Tokyo, Osaka, and Busan immediately. The orders came rapid fire, detailing logistics, coordination, and the combined effort needed to manage the crisis. Each directive felt like a puzzle piece being slotted into place. When the meeting ended, Takahashi barely had time to process the tidal wave of information. He rose from his seat, offering a brief nod to the other attendees before heading straight to his next task. 3 hours later, he was in the backseat of a government vehicle, its tires slicing through rain-slick streets as it sped toward Gravatamoni. The city was a maze of devastation, and he was on site to oversee the arrival of rescue teams and direct operations personally. Takahashi glanced at his phone, where a family photo was set as his wallpaper. 3 smiling faces stared back at him, their joy frozen in time beneath the words. A family never separates. He clenched his fist, his chest tightening. The image brought him a fleeting sense of hope and crushing dread all at once. His wife and child had been in the southern district when the disaster struck. He had received no news of them yet, and the uncertainty gnawed at his resolve. As the vehicle approached the airport, Takahashi rolled down the window slightly, letting in the brisk night air. The smell of rain mingled with the acrid tang of smoke. The sky was dark, but the horizon glowed faintly with the headlights of incoming rescue convoys. "Sir," said his driver, breaking the silence. "The first team is 5 minutes out." "Good," Takahashi replied, straightening in his seat. "We'll need every hand we can get." The car pulled up to the makeshift command center, a flurry of activity as volunteers and officials worked tirelessly to coordinate the relief effort. Takahashi stepped out, pulling his coat tighter against the chill. He spent the next several hours directing operations, delegating tasks, and ensuring resources were distributed effectively. Every moment felt like walking a tightrope. One misstep, and lives would be lost. Read 45 advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Humanity's response. Human POV. Tears spilled onto Hideo Takahashi's trembling hands, his body racked with sobs he refused to let escape fully. He wanted to scream, to cry out into the uncaring night, but his rational mind held him back, reminding him of the others still nearby, sharing his burden of despair. He dug his nails into his palms, the sting grounding him, anchoring his spiraling thoughts. Only this small, self-inflicted pain kept him from collapsing entirely, allowing him to cling to a sliver of sanity. He had prepared himself for this moment, or so he thought. Days of backbreaking labor and relentless focus on logistics had dulled his emotions, numbing his heart with sheer exhaustion. But now, as he knelt before the charred remains of his wife and daughter, locked forever in a final embrace, all pretense of strength crumbled. A raw, inhuman wail tore from his throat, a sound born of anguish too great to contain. His knees hit the scorched earth, and he could only stare at them, frozen together in death as they had been in life. At least now, they would never be apart. Are you sure you're okay? Wei Zhang studied his superior and friend, his brow creased with concern. Me. I'm fine, Hideo replied, his tone clipped and rehearsed, as if saying the words often enough would make them true. Wei's frown deepened. Are you really fine? Because, no offense, you don't look like someone who just walked away from that. Hideo waved him off, straightening his posture and tugging at his disheveled jacket. I said I'm fine, and I mean it. I'm not the only one here who's lost family. As the head of the emergency response department, I don't have the luxury of falling apart. Wei hesitated. He could see the strain in Hideo's bloodshot eyes and the stiff, almost mechanical movements of his hands as he adjusted the bandage on his palm. Hideo wasn't fine, not by a long shot, but Wei also knew better than to push. All right, Wei relented with a sigh, stepping aside. But for what it's worth, you don't have to carry this alone, you know. Hideo gave a faint nod, his lips twitching in a shadow of a smile. Thank you, Wei. But I have a job to do. The rescue team's headquarters loomed ahead, a massive, hastily assembled tent buzzing with activity. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and the low hum of conversations in multiple languages. Hideo stepped inside, greeted by Captain Dong Gongyang of the Asian rescue team. The man was solidly built, his broad shoulders giving him the appearance of someone accustomed to bearing great burdens. Hideo Takahashi, head of the Hokkaido Emergency Response Department, Hideo introduced himself, bowing slightly. Dong returned the gesture with equal respect. Captain Dong Gongyang. My deepest condolences for your loss. Hideo's face tightened, but he managed a polite nod. Thank you. Let's get to work. The meeting was long and grueling, involving meticulous discussions about supply distribution, personnel accommodations, and the monumental task of repairing the breach in Griffin Dam. Representatives from European and American rescue teams joined via video, their pixelated faces flickering on the screen. Despite the gravity of the topics, Hideo's mind occasionally drifted. Each mention of timelines and resource constraints felt like a cruel reminder of how little time his family had been given. As the meeting adjourned, Hideo lingered near the exit. His gaze flickered to a group of researchers huddled around a monitor, replaying footage of Godzilla's landing. Could you answer a few questions for me? He asked suddenly, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Please. I need to know more about that creature. His plea hung in the air, drawing the attention of everyone in the tent. The researchers exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. General Luo, seated nearby, cleared his throat. Go ahead, he said, his tone surprisingly gentle. Answer his questions. Relieved, the lead researcher stepped forward. What would you like to know, Mr. Takahashi? Hideo's eyes burned with intensity as he asked, what are these Titan behemoths, exactly? The researcher blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Ah, well. They're the stuff of monster movies, really. Or rather, monster movies were inspired by them. Biologically speaking, they're the pinnacle of K-selection evolution, creatures that prioritize individual growth over reproduction. Think of them as living, breathing nuclear reactors. She gestured to the screen, where Godzilla's towering form loomed over a devastated landscape. The one we're dealing with now is unprecedented. At 200 meters tall, it's the largest Titan ever recorded. We're calling it, King of the Titans. Hideo's stomach churned. 200 meters. And you're sure we can defeat it? The researcher hesitated, glancing at General Luo. When the general gave a slight nod, she continued. Don't worry, Mr. Takahashi. Our weapons are far more advanced than anything in those old monster movies. Godzilla may be big, but it's not invincible. The military will handle it. Hideo nodded, but the reassurance felt hollow. His mind returned to the image of his family, burned beyond recognition. His fists clenched at his sides, the bandaged hand throbbing in protest. Thank you, he said quietly, bowing to the researchers. I appreciate your time. As he left the tent, Hideo's resolve hardened. He didn't know if humanity could truly defeat Godzilla, but one thing was certain, he would see it fall, no matter the cost. Outside, the cold night air bit at his face, but it did little to cool the fire burning within him. Somewhere in the distance, the low rumble of explosions echoed, a reminder that the battle against the Titans was far from over. And neither was his. 2 comments 0 vote. Planning. Human Pav. Why did you come over, Mikhail? Weren't you supposed to receive the commanders of the 2 fleets? The fleet commanders and vice commanders from the Indian Ocean have arrived. They're all discussing the detailed operational plans with that old man, Admiral Chester. I couldn't get a word in, so I just came back. When I returned, I hardly saw anyone. After thinking it over, I decided to come and talk to you. I feel really frustrated today. The nuclear submarines from the entire Pacific Fleet and the Indian Ocean Fleet will participate in this extermination operation. It's unexpected that those naval folks who desperately insisted on maintaining submarines actually have a day where they are useful. This time, it's us who are useless. The longer we stay there, the more frustrated I feel. I have a feeling those old fogies are laughing at me. How do you say it in your dialect? Feng Shui turns in cycles. It's Feng Shui Lun Huan. Yes, that's it. It's our turn this time. In the past, we laughed at those guys who had no place to showcase their skills and could only help us transport supplies and provide support. But this time, we have become their support. It's indeed a Feng Shui Lun Huan situation. It certainly is quite a Feng Shui Lun Huan, but this time, it's the naval folks who will have the chance to display their might in the end. That's for sure. It won't be long before only one of the 3 ocean fleets remains. We have too many fleets now. Saying this, Mikhail extinguished his cigarette and threw it into the trash can. We certainly have too many fleets. There are no enemies at sea now, let alone them. Even we have too many. Zhen Guoxiang, General Zhen, also put out his cigarette and fell into contemplation as he looked outside the window, where robots were continuously loading cargo onto the ships. Sometimes, I even miss the days when we had separatists. Wow, that's something you shouldn't say lightly, but I understand what you mean. In the past decade or so, the status of their army, navy, and even air force had declined. From the turbulent era 100 years ago when humanity had just ended the nuclear war and established a unified government, relying on large-scale military forces to maintain stability, to several decades ago when there was a hidden undercurrent of terrorist attacks by separatists all over the world. And more recently, in the past 10 years, there hasn't been a single terrorist or extremist attack in the world, a state of complete peace. As time passed, the role of the military became increasingly awkward. The army was still somewhat relevant since they had criminals, large-scale criminal organizations operating in the shadows, and terrorists to target. But what about the Air Force and Navy? They truly had no purpose anymore. The last time battleships and nuclear submarines truly engaged in combat was over 80 years ago. Back then, they weren't using advanced technology. It was simply a matter of dealing with pirates and outlaws. The world has long been unified, and there are no more enemies on Earth. And if there are enemies in space, it's not the concern of the Navy. So, the Navy has always been at the bottom of the military hierarchy, but little did they know that even at the lowest rung of this hierarchy, there would come a time for them to rise. I imagine those Navy guys must have jumped for joy when they saw Godzilla retreat into the deep sea. After all, that's when they can prove their worth, right? By the way, has that thing called Godzilla been found? Let's not talk about separatists. It's not a good idea in case someone is eavesdropping. Let's discuss something else, like the movements of the Titans. Not yet, and I don't think we'll find Godzilla in a short period of time. Even if the Navy doesn't interfere, we still can't locate it. The average depth of the ocean exceeds 3,000 meters, with an area of over 370 million square kilometers. It's impossible for any human detection device to find Godzilla quickly. Even if Godzilla is enormous, it's still unlikely because the ocean is just too vast. Can't we use sonar buoys? Mikhail asked with some confusion, but General Gen shook his head in response. Sonar buoys. Each buoy requires several kilotons of energy. We would need hundreds of trillions of kilotons to cover the entire world's oceans. It's impossible to do it this way. So, we just sit here shaking our heads. Letting that thing that killed hundreds of thousands of us roam free. If it were up to me, I would spend as much money as needed to find Godzilla in the shortest possible time and cut off its head, placing it on the city square. Mikhail raised an eyebrow, and his statement would make anyone with a basic understanding of economics burst into laughter if said outside. Spend as much money as needed. That would lead to a complete economic collapse. The losses would only increase. Even though he held the rank of Major General, he still spoke like an immature kid. However, General Gen, who listened to his words, couldn't find it amusing. Although he understood that this plan was certainly unfeasible in reality, when he thought about the wailing people and charred bodies he saw today in Graphidomony, he wanted to support Mikhail's childish idea. Even if it was completely detached from reality. For now, let's not dwell on these matters. Tomorrow, the Navy will conduct the first underwater search. Hopefully, they'll find Godzilla soon. I hope the Navy personnel have a sense of conscience and won't intentionally ignore it to maintain their position. All we can do now is wait. Wait until the day we find Godzilla and kill it. As he said this, General Gen lit another cigarette. His office, or rather the entire military garrison, was lacking in people. This was also due to policy factors. The garrison had become outdated, and there weren't as many separatist enemies in the world anymore. When there were more people in this place, he used to discourage smoking. But now, with fewer people, he found himself smoking. If we find it, can we defeat it? Out of the blue, Mikhail suddenly asked this question, and General Gen, upon hearing this familiar question, paused for a moment and then replied. We should be able to defeat it. At least that's what the group of researchers working on this thing told me this morning. That monster doesn't stand a chance against our current fleet. Just think about it, even the ancient civilizations weaker than us managed to wipe out these creatures. Why can't we, who are more advanced, do the same? To General Gen's answer, Mikhail obviously didn't agree much. After listening, he muttered, I don't necessarily think so, you know. The Navy personnel have never been in combat before, while we've at least fought against terrorism. But those Navy folks, they're all inexperienced recruits. And although our technology has advanced, the number of our fleet has decreased significantly. The Navy's nuclear submarines, combined in all three oceans, amount to only 30, which is less than what a single country had before a major war. Not to mention the other naval forces. So, I don't think these fleets will necessarily win. Mikhail expressed his doubts about whether the Navy could defeat Godzilla, and General Gen couldn't find a counter-argument at that moment. In the end, they could only respond to Mikhail with the classic old phrase, I don't know. Read 45 advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Force of Nature. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. Huu. The rhythmic sound of deep, sonorous breathing echoed in the stillness of the ocean's abyss. Remaining hibernate time, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 10 seconds. The vibrations grew more pronounced, rippling through the frigid waters of the Mariana Trench like the slow ticking of an ancient clock. Huu. Remaining hibernate time, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 5 seconds. A faint glow began to emanate from the trench, a fiery red light growing steadily brighter. It was the heartbeat of something ancient, something powerful. Huu. Remaining hibernate time, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 3 seconds. The Earth seemed to hold its breath as the glow flared to a blinding intensity. Snap. Hibernation cycle terminated. Evolutionary milestone achieved. With a rumble that shook the ocean floor, Godzilla stirred. The king of monsters had awoken. The Titan stretched lazily as if waking from a pleasant nap. Its massive, muscular body emerged from its lair, larger and more formidable than ever. The dark waters of the trench barely concealed the colossal figure, its jagged dorsal plates glowing faintly with residual energy. Godzilla let out a low, guttural roar, a sound that seemed to resonate with the very core of the planet. What has the system wrought this time? The Titan pondered as a glowing panel materialized in its mind, displaying a wealth of data. Host name: Godzilla Energy Supply Reaction, Magnetic Confinement Deuterium Tritium Fusion. Hibernate Power, 15 gigawatts. Active Power, 1 terawatt. Peak Output, 300 terawatts. Instantaneous Power, 10 petawatts. Body Size. Height, 230 meters. Mass, 1.5 million tons. Total length, 417 meters. Body composition. Ultra-dense beta iron composite carbon nanotubes. Tensile strength, 80 gigapascals. Compressive strength, 60 gigapascals. Breath, high temperature plasma. Peak output, 280 terawatts. Instantaneous power, 9.9 petawatts. Self-repair capability, 1,000 tons per day. Godzilla surveyed the information with a mixture of pride and curiosity. The evolution had been thorough, leaving its already imposing body even more terrifying. Its once slender arms were now bulging with muscle, though still humorously stubby compared to its massive frame. Its upgraded body composition had increased both strength and durability by an order of magnitude. With a satisfied grunt, Godzilla flexed its tail, now resembling a massive battering ram, and swung it into the side of a nearby underwater cliff. Crack. Boom. The cliff exploded in a shower of debris, sending massive boulders tumbling to the seabed. The impact left a jagged, web-like pattern of cracks stretching hundreds of meters in every direction. Godzilla tilted its head in amusement, the equivalent of a smug smirk for a titan. Still got it, it seemed to say. But not everything about the evolution was perfect. Godzilla's dorsal plates dimmed slightly as it examined one stat on the panel. Its self-repair capability had dropped significantly, from regenerating 5,000 tons of tissue per day to just 1,000 tons. A wound that once took a day to heal would now take 5. The system explained the trade-off. The new beta iron and carbon nanotube composition, while far superior in strength, required more intricate and time-consuming repairs. Godzilla snorted, dismissing the thought. It had gained so much in this evolution, what was a little slower healing in exchange for nearly indestructible armor? Roar. The ocean vibrated with the sound of its triumphant bellow. Godzilla's joy, however, was short-lived. The Titan's glow dimmed as a wave of melancholy washed over it. This wasn't its first evolution, nor its first awakening. Each slumber lasted centuries, sometimes millennia. Every time it awoke, the world had changed. The familiar faces of its fellow Titans, the ones who had shared its long existence, were gone. This time, though, something was different. Its hibernation had been unusually short, just 2 days. A blink of an eye in the life of an immortal creature. Yet even in that short time, Godzilla felt the absence of its companions, their presence lost to the relentless march of time. Woo! A low, mournful moan escaped its throat, reverberating through the water. It was a sound of grief, loneliness, and resolve. The ancient guardian shook itself, pushing aside the sorrow. It still had a mission, a responsibility entrusted to it by the planet itself. Humanity had overstepped its bounds, poisoning the earth and endangering all life. Godzilla's purpose was clear: restore balance, no matter the cost. With a powerful sweep of its tail, Godzilla propelled itself upwards, breaking through the darkness of the trench. The increased density of its new body made swimming more laborious, but its enhanced strength more than compensated. Each stroke sent shockwaves rippling through the water as the Titan surged toward the surface. March 19, 2208, 2:15 a.m. The command center of the Indian fleet's flagship was a hive of activity. Radar screens glowed, officers shouted orders, and the tension in the air was palpable. Longitude 151.73, latitude 25.87. An officer called out. We've detected Godzilla approaching the Japanese archipelago at over 40 knots. Estimated landfall, Tokyo metropolitan area in 17 hours. Commander Akira Tanaka stood at the center of the chaos, his face grim. The screen before him displayed a grainy image of the behemoth, its shadow cutting through the ocean like a knife. It surfaced on its own. Why now? He muttered. Another officer chimed in, Sir, should we notify the Tokyo government to begin evacuation? Yes. Tanaka snapped. And alert the Pacific Fleet. We'll need every resource they have. He turned to his crew, his voice commanding. Indian Fleet, prepare for full deployment. We have 10 minutes to launch all forces. Godzilla must be stopped before it makes landfall. The room exploded into motion as alarms blared. Ships began to mobilize, missiles were prepped, and fighter jets roared to life on the decks of carriers. Unbeknownst to them, Godzilla was already aware of their preparations. The king of monsters had faced humanity's weapons countless times before, and each time, it had emerged victorious. This time would be no different. As it broke through the surface of the ocean, the first rays of dawn painted its massive frame in golden light. Godzilla let out a thunderous roar, a challenge to the world. Read 45 advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Panic. Breaking news. According to observations by Starchain Corporation, 55 minutes ago, the World United Government officially detected the Titan monster, Godzilla. This is the same creature that attacked Glaucodamoni 3 days ago, now moving toward the Tokyo metropolitan area through the Pacific Ocean. On the television, a poised news anchor, a charming woman in a tailored suit, read the urgent report with calm professionalism. 25 minutes ago, the World United Government dispatched the Indian Ocean Expeditionary First Fleet to intercept Godzilla. The fleet is expected to engage the monster in approximately 11 hours. Behind her, a digital display of a starry galaxy provided a dramatic backdrop, underscoring the gravity of the situation. The Tokyo metropolitan area has initiated a large-scale evacuation. Within the next 10 hours, an estimated 30 million residents across 13 coastal districts are expected to evacuate, marking the largest population movement since the Agatha terrorist attack 50 years ago. The screen transitioned to a bustling outdoor scene in Tokyo, replacing the studio's sterile calm with the chaotic reality on the ground. This is Sakura Fujimoto, reporting live from Tokyo, said a young female correspondent standing amidst a packed crowd. Her voice carried a mix of urgency and resolve as she detailed the situation. As you can see, the streets are overflowing with people. Families, children, and elderly alike are rushing to evacuation points. Many barely had time to grab their belongings before leaving. The atmosphere is tense, yet everyone is remarkably orderly, queuing patiently for their turn to board the supersonic trains. She gestured toward the rows of waiting trains in the background, their sleek designs a stark contrast to the human chaos. Tokyo has deployed 20 supersonic trains across 13 evacuation zones, each capable of carrying 8,000 passengers per trip. A single round trip to Osaka takes just 10 minutes, making these trains the primary mode of transport tonight. The reporter continued, her voice steady despite the urgency. However, with over 30 million people to evacuate, the trains alone won't suffice. All 11 airports in Tokyo are operating at full capacity, and 7 maglev highways leading out of the city have been converted into one-way lanes to accelerate the evacuation. Behind her, the endless lines of evacuees moved like waves, orderly yet unrelenting. As the broadcast continued, Daisuke Mori sat slumped on his couch in Sapporo, staring at the television. His hand tightened around the remote as the words, Godzilla reappears, flashed across the screen. So it's finally happening. Daisuke had been running on fumes for days, working non-stop on the rescue operations in Glaucodamoni. His body had finally given out during a meeting, collapsing in front of his colleagues. Hours later, his friend Hiroshi Nakagawa had carried him home, insisting he take a break. You need to rest, Hiroshi had said firmly. The immediate crisis is over. Save your strength for what's coming. Daisuke had reluctantly agreed, his exhaustion overriding his pride. But rest seemed impossible now. He grabbed his phone and began scrolling through social media, his thumb flicking past endless posts. Tokyo terrorist hunter. Godzilla is heading for Tokyo. Someone save us. Top J. That's why you should be drinking sparkling water. Japanese diddler. Kyoto residents offering shelter, DM for details. I didn't live in Tokyo. Thank God I don't live in Tokyo. Chibi healer. Stay safe, everyone. Please evacuate. The timeline was a chaotic mix of panic, sarcasm, and the occasional act of kindness. Some posts praised the government's evacuation efforts, while others mocked them. Kaiju conspiracy. Godzilla's coming to teach Tokyo a lesson, one tweet read, dripping with malice. Daisuke scowled, his fingers hovering over the screen, ready to fire back. Before he could type, the tweet disappeared, a notification informed him the account had been permanently banned. At least someone was taking action, even if it was just the moderators. He scrolled further, pausing at a headline that made his stomach drop. Starchain Live. Starchain Corporation, live tracking Godzilla's path of destruction. The article announced a 24-hour livestream covering every movement of the monster. Daisuke hesitated, then clicked the link. The stream showed a dark expanse of ocean, the faint outline of a massive shadow moving just beneath the surface. There it was. The creature that had taken so much from him. His chest tightened as memories flooded back, memories of a life that no longer existed. He glanced around his quiet living room, the silence almost deafening. Mom, can you make me some coffee? He began, his voice breaking mid-sentence. He stopped himself, the words hanging in the air like a ghost. She wasn't here. Neither was his wife. Nor his daughter. They were all gone. He was alone. Daisuke sank back into the couch, staring at the ceiling. The weight of his loss pressed down on him, heavier than anything he'd faced at work. He set his phone aside, knowing he wouldn't sleep tonight. Read 45 advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. The Indian Fleet vs Godzilla. The Indian Ocean Precedent's First Fleet, better known simply as the Indian Ocean Fleet, stood as the world's second largest naval force, an indomitable arm of the World United Government. For over 80 years, alongside the other two major fleets, it had been the Iron Hammer keeping countless separatists and rogue nations in check. Their presence alone was enough to quell most rebellions before they could even spark. Though the fleet had never actually fired a shot in direct warfare, it hung like the sword of Damocles over those who dared to challenge the United Government's rule. And today, for the first time in its history, the blade would finally fall, not upon humans, but upon something far worse. The target. The deadliest creature in human history, Godzilla. For decades, this behemoth had ravaged the world, bringing entire civilizations to their knees. No war, no plague, no disaster had ever claimed as many lives. And now, it was heading straight for Tokyo. The world's most formidable naval force would be the first, and perhaps last, line of defense. 9 superconductive magnetohydrodynamic propulsion submarines formed the vanguard, designed to operate in the most extreme underwater conditions. Supporting them were 5 anti-submarine destroyers and 7 missile destroyers, a secondary force meant to hammer the target from a safe distance. 8 anti-submarine frigates and 22 missile frigates established a strategic encirclement, ensuring there was no escape. Above them loomed the real giants, 3 main aircraft carriers, each bristling with cutting-edge drones, torpedoes, and bombers, serving as the nerve centers of the operation. 54 warships, over 500,000 tons of military firepower, advancing at breakneck speed through the Nemuro Strait, their mission clear. Do not let it reach Tokyo. The command center aboard the fleet's flagship carrier was a symphony of flashing screens, radio chatter, and tense officers monitoring every blip on the radar. The tension was so thick it could have been cut with a kaiju-sized knife. Commander, Godzilla is now within range of our main fleet. Should we launch the attack? All eyes turned to Commander Huang, a grizzled veteran whose career had been defined more by diplomacy than warfare. Yet, today, he would be the one to give the order to attack the greatest threat humanity had ever known. He stared at the massive projection of Godzilla moving beneath the waves, an unstoppable shadow creeping toward civilization. Launch the attack. Stick to the plan, surround it, keep it at range, and pound it to pieces. Yes, sir. The operation had been meticulously planned over the past 12 hours, using real-time satellite imagery, military archives, and advice from leading Titan experts. Every possible scenario had been considered. The nuclear submarines would strike first, unleashing a barrage of heavy torpedoes from 5 nautical miles out. The surrounding waters would be filled with deep-sea mines, cutting off Godzilla's escape route and forcing it into a constant state of evasive maneuvering. The destroyers would follow up with anti-submarine strikes from 15 nautical miles, using high-speed torpedoes, drone attacks, and guided missiles. Their primary objective: drive it away from Tokyo, forcing it back into the deep Pacific. Meanwhile, the frigates would split into 2 groups. One would maintain a frontal firepower blockade at 30 nautical miles, while the other would lay a web of heavy mines behind Godzilla, preventing it from retreating back to safety. Finally, the aircraft carriers, acting as the fleet's command hub, would deploy swarms of drones and bombers. If Godzilla surfaced in shallow waters, they would rain destruction from above. All units, open fire. Boom. 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 Like the synchronized beat of a war drum, 51 warships unleashed their payloads in a single, coordinated strike. Over 100 anti-submarine missiles launched in unison, their thrusters igniting in blinding flashes of orange and blue. Each missile carried a 400 mm torpedo, packed with a terrifying 80 kilograms of high-yield explosives. These weren't the crude warheads of the past. They were powered by anionic salt explosives, boasting 10 times the destructive power of TNT. The sky over the Pacific filled with streaks of light as the missiles arced toward their target, a storm of destruction raining down from the heavens. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Direct hit. The satellite feed displayed an ocean surface erupting in towering water plumes, each explosion sending shockwaves across the sea. A shadow loomed beneath the waves. And it did not stop moving. What's its reaction? The silence in the command center was deafening. Every screen, every radar showed the same thing. Godzilla was still moving. No deviation. No change in speed. No attempt to dive. It was as if the 100-missile barrage had never happened. Commander, an officer hesitated. No change in speed, direction, or depth. It didn't even try to evade. The realization sank in like a stone in their stomachs. Those torpedoes. The ones powerful enough to flatten a city block. They had about as much impact on Godzilla as a mild inconvenience. Could this even be considered a living creature? Someone muttered. How can anything survive that? Commander Huang clenched his fists. This wasn't part of the plan. Hope you're all enjoying the story. Want to get ahead of the schedule and access 40+ extra chapters from my stories? Plus, support my work. Check out my Patreon, patreon.com, fallen_stone. Fallen_stone creators thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Reckoning. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. SKREEEEEOINK. The Titan's guttural cry thundered through the ocean depths, a raw, primal response to the human attack. Though their assault was insignificant, it was enough to stir the beast, a mistake on their part. Godzilla moved through the abyss, its massive tail churning the waters. Its ancient senses, honed through eons of dominance, locked onto the distant fleet. Instinct dictated action. Instinct demanded destruction. Prey. Weak. Arrogant. These creatures thought themselves rulers. They relied on fire and metal, believing their fragile weapons could challenge the king of all things. But the sea had no masters except one. A deep pulse resonated in its mind. Side mission: the mercy of the monster king. The feeble ones believe their might is absolute. The king knows otherwise. To teach them, the king shall remind them of their place. Reward: power reactor enhancement. A flicker of something primal, hunger, rage, and ancient purpose. Godzilla had not yet completed this hunt. Power surged in its colossal frame. The need to assert dominance, to claim this world as it had in the age before men, burned within. But another call in the void beckoned. Side mission: human nest, now a wasteland. They scatter, they hide. But the king does not forget. Hunt them. Tear their sanctuary apart. Let the earth tremble beneath the absence of their kind. Reward: human radar, the ability to seek the vermin wherever they burrow. This one, it would aid the hunt. To rid this world of their presence. To return it to the old ways. The right ways. But first, the ones before it needed to be crushed. Human POV. The unmanned submarines are within 5 nautical miles of the target. Engage high-speed torpedoes. In the command center, a silent tension hung over the officers as they monitored the sonar image of the beast. With precision, over 180 torpedoes launched, slicing through the abyss at incredible speeds. Each one a spear aimed at the monster's hide. Godzilla sensed them the moment they left their tubes. Its primitive sonar, a gift of countless ages, mapped their paths. It did not move. It did not flinch. Let them come. Boom. 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 The water exploded with white-hot energy. Bubbles, each hotter than the flames of man, engulfed the Titan in violent bursts. For a moment, the sonar projection wavered. Did we? One officer leaned forward, anticipation thick in his voice. Data streamed in. Godzilla stood. No wounds. No marks. The primitive terror in its eyes had not dulled. Impossible. The technician's voice cracked. There's no damage. Not even surface level. Commander Nakamura clenched his jaw. The plan had been simple: wound the creature, deter it, force it to reconsider its advance. Instead, they had barely earned its attention. Switch to heavy torpedoes, Nakamura ordered, his voice tight. And get the Pacific Fleet on standby. We need more firepower. The water settled. The heat dispersed. And from within the steam, Godzilla emerged. Pristine. Unscathed. Unrelenting. This was no mere monster. No mistake of nature. This was something beyond their understanding, something ancient and absolute. It did not merely survive the torpedoes. It endured them. The crude explosions rippled across its composite hide, beta iron fused with the resilience of an unbreakable past. The feeble assaults left nothing but a lingering warmth against its scales. This was no battle. This was a reminder. Above, the air churned with an approaching swarm. Unmanned bombers, their payloads primed, ready to rain fire upon the sea. At the same time, unseen beneath the waves, submarines readied their heaviest ordnance. Godzilla's eyes burned with ancient fury. Enough. Its jaws parted. Light ignited from within, a glow older than the stars. The ocean trembled as the abyss itself recoiled. A cataclysm was coming. Read 40+ advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. The God of Destruction. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. In the dark depths, hundreds of meters below, a majestic light illuminates everything, separating the abyss from eternal darkness. It exposes the vast ocean, transforming all things. Flames, moving at several times the speed of sound, erupt from Godzilla's mouth, carving through the murky depths toward the surface. The sea is torn apart. An unimaginable surge of heat is released, instantly vaporizing thousands of tons of water, birthing an enormous gas bubble. The plasma, hurled forth by Godzilla, struggles against the crushing weight of the ocean, expanding into a roiling inferno. Yet, the sheer force of its breath reshapes the deep, its fury boiling the sea itself. Under unbearable heat and pressure, the firestorm expands endlessly, merging with the massive gas bubble. Then, in an unstoppable surge, it reaches the surface. Boom. With a thunderous roar, the ocean shatters. Shallow waters are cast skyward by the raw force of the explosion. Tens of thousands, no, hundreds of thousands of tons of water, erupt in a colossal column that bridges sea and sky. It is a sight beyond human comprehension. From the abyss, a fireball hundreds of meters wide rises, glowing like a newborn sun. It ascends, defying gravity, consuming everything in its path. Missiles and drones caught in its wake are annihilated before they can react. The missiles explode under the blistering heat, while bombers reel from the shockwave. Some plummet from the sky, crashing into the water as lifeless husks of metal. Godzilla watches as the ocean above is momentarily erased. The sea has parted before its might. It gazes at the heavens, then vanishes beneath the waves as the ocean crashes back into place. Human POV. 33 drones have lost contact. 40 nautical miles away, inside the command center, the personnel watch the devastation unfold, their scalps tingling. Even at such a distance, they can see it with the naked eye. The sky, turned crimson. A firestorm raging across the horizon. A sun, birthed from the abyss. 1/5 of their 150 aerial drones are gone. Vaporized. If they'd been even a second slower, they would all be gone. But this is good news. The lead analyst exhales a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Their calculations hold true. Godzilla's atomic breath aligns with our projections. No unexpected deviations. Thank God. Had its power exceeded expectations, as its physical might had, this battle would already be over. But for now, they still had a chance. A glimmer of hope. All nuclear submarines and unmanned submersibles are in position. Sea mines deployed ahead. Order the forward destroyers to release deep-sea mines. Support the nuclear fleet and force Godzilla into shallow waters. As Godzilla engages the unmanned submarines and drones, 9 Poseidon-class nuclear submarines move in. Armed with super-heavy torpedoes and a field of sea mines, they have one objective: trap Godzilla in shallow waters, where it will be vulnerable to surface strikes. According to the plan, they were meant to encircle it, force a shift in direction. But plans change. Godzilla does not waver. So they adapt. The encirclement shifts into a full frontal assault. The submarines unleash their deadliest weapons. 820mm SPN heavy torpedoes, super nitrogen, each armed with a 700kg anionic salt warhead. They travel at 80 knots, designed to sink entire fortresses. 20 of them streaked toward Godzilla, accompanied by anti-submarine missiles and a dense minefield. Boom. 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 Explosions tear through the sea as anti-submarine missiles strike first. They hit Godzilla's face. But as before, they are gnats against a god. Then, the torpedoes. Godzilla senses them. The glow of atomic energy gathers in its maw. But suddenly, it stops. It does not fire. It waits. The torpedoes close in. Then, detonation. A force 100 times stronger than the previous missiles slams into Godzilla. The deep trembles. The shockwave alone halts its movement, forcing it downward. It's working. Inside the command center, cheers erupt. They cannot see through the turbulence, but the result is clear. Godzilla has stopped. The torpedoes worked. Yet, deep in the abyss, Godzilla stirs. It assesses the damage. And then, it begins to rise. The humans believe they have forced it into the shallows. They do not understand. Godzilla is not fleeing the deep. It is ascending. To bring ruin to the world above. Read 40+ advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Total assault. Human POV. Godzilla was surfacing. It's at 700 meters. 600 meters. 500 meters. 400 meters. It has entered the shallow sea region, within 100 meters of the surface. A brief pause. Then. Its dorsal fins have breached. We did it. The control room erupted into a brief cheer before the tension set back in. The battle was far from over. What about the positions of the fleet? The commander barked. The nuclear submarine fleet is holding at 8 nautical miles, frontline escort ships are 24 nautical miles away, and destroyers are positioned at 18 nautical miles. All forces are ready for deployment. Command at your discretion, sir. The commander exhaled sharply. Very well. Launch the final offensive. Have the escort ships and destroyers close into 15 nautical miles and unleash everything at maximum range. He clenched his fist. Now that it's in the shallows, we cannot allow it to retreat. All forces, attack. On the sea surface, destroyers and escort ships had already locked onto Godzilla, tracking the kaiju's massive form beneath the waves. Within moments. Whoosh. Boom. Cruise missiles, each weighing 2,000 kilograms, roared from their launchers. They shot into the sky like fiery spears, streaking across the heavens at Mach 10. The fleet emptied their missile launchers with machine-like efficiency. Every few seconds, another missile ignited and rocketed into the air. One after another, they ascended without pause. To the onlookers, it seemed as though an artificial meteor shower had been unleashed upon the ocean, all of them converging on one unholy titan below. Beneath the surface, the fleet of 9 nuclear submarines had moved in, surrounding Godzilla from multiple angles. Their torpedo bays sprang to life. Within moments, dozens of super-heavy torpedoes were in the water, racing toward their target. More followed as unmanned submarines fired in synchronized rhythm, a relentless underwater assault. Above, 128 bombers formed a death squadron in the sky. They rained destruction from thousands of meters above, dropping conventional missiles with brutal precision. Unmanned drones followed, descending rapidly to unleash a second wave of firepower at near point-blank range. The ocean roared in protest, a battlefield of air, sea, and fire. This was humanity's answer to the impossible. The full might of an entire fleet converged into one moment of absolute carnage. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. Godzilla sensed the chaos before it saw it. The deep, rumbling pulses of sonar painted a picture of encroaching doom. From above, the glint of thousands of incoming missiles filled its peripheral vision. It let out a low, guttural growl. They've come prepared. But rather than retreating, Godzilla surged upward, its colossal frame pushing against the ocean's weight until its head broke through the surface. Whoosh. Water cascaded down its armored hide as it raised its head toward the sky. Its massive jaws unhinged, and then. Boom. A searing torrent of atomic breath erupted from its mouth. The sky turned white hot, the sheer heat setting the very air ablaze. Without the water to dampen its energy, the flame storm stretched 3 times farther than before. Drones in its path vaporized instantly, missiles were swallowed whole, detonating midair like fireworks. For a moment, it seemed as though Godzilla had seized control of the battlefield. Then came the second wave. For every missile destroyed, 3 more took its place. A relentless barrage pierced through the firestorm, punching through the inferno to reach their target. Boom. 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 Hundreds of missiles, thousands of tons of explosives, detonated upon impact. Torpedoes, fired from the depths, slammed into Godzilla's submerged body. The water around it boiled instantly, sending superheated shockwaves through the ocean. Steam rose in thick, suffocating plumes as entire sections of the sea evaporated from the sheer energy release. The numbers were staggering: 2,500 cruise missiles, 800 heavyweight torpedoes, launched by 51 warships, bombers, submarines, and drones. The sky and sea were filled with destruction. There was nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. Human POV. In the command center, the tension was suffocating. Status. The commander demanded. Direct hits confirmed. Godzilla's movements are slowing. A technician shouted over the chaos. Another officer gritted his teeth. Shockwaves are interfering with sonar, we can't get a clear visual. The nuclear fireballs are obstructing satellite images. Then analyze its behavior. What's it doing? The room fell into tense silence as readings poured in. Godzilla wasn't diving. It wasn't counter-attacking. It wasn't even moving its tail. A murmur rippled through the room. Commander, I think we've done it. 0 comments, 0 vote. Pissed. Download the app for additional rewards. More events, more perks. Winning you more free perks. Download now. Fallen_stone. Download app now. Unstoppable. Human POV. Don't let your guard down. It may not be dead yet. Deploy unmanned vessels to lay proximity mines in its path. We must block its last escape route. Even as the fleet's relentless bombardment continued, the command center remained disciplined. No one was foolish enough to assume victory just because they had rained fire upon the massive creature for a few minutes. Godzilla was down, but that didn't mean it was out. The current attack had momentarily stunned the monster, forcing it into a dazed, immobile state. But once it regained its senses, its survival instincts would kick in. It would attempt to dive into deeper waters, escaping the fleet's relentless assault. That was the natural course of action for a beast like this. The solution: prevent it from submerging at all costs. Unmanned submarines were swiftly deployed, diving into the ocean's depths, their mission simple yet crucial: release naval mines directly beneath Godzilla. These weren't just any mines, they were powerful, each one capable of producing an explosion far greater than a standard missile. Nearly 1,000 of them were laid out, forming an underwater cage of destruction. A checkmate. Godzilla had nowhere left to run. In the command room, silence hung over the team as they monitored every movement on their screens. The saturation bombardment had continued for 14 brutal seconds before a ceasefire was ordered. As the smoke and debris settled, the beast showed no signs of further movement. A collective breath of relief spread through the room. It's over. One by one, tension gave way to celebration. Phew, we finally won. I wonder what happened to Wonkai. Someone mused. Who cares? Let's go for a drink, Commander. We should celebrate this victory in style. We're definitely getting the budget increase now. Laughter spread through the command room. The younger officers, many of whom had joined the operation for experience, took the opportunity to joke around. Even the hardened veterans allowed themselves to smile. Commander Huang, when we get back, my daughter will be turning 1. Think you can come over? I want you to draw lots for her. If she gets yours, she'll be blessed for sure. Let's not rush things. We'll talk about it after we return. Thanks, Commander. With you drawing the lots, my daughter's future is set. Hey, after this mission, would you be interested in attending my brother's wedding? He's admired you for a long time. I'll check my schedule when we're back. But remember, the battle isn't over yet. Huang, my father wants to have a discussion with you once we return. Commander Huang forced a smile, deflecting the conversations with polite nods. He wasn't opposed to these young officers vying for his attention. After all, his success today meant a significant boost in his career. Many of them came from prominent political families, and they knew full well that after this battle, his future would be set on an upward trajectory. But something felt off. That lingering sense of unease gnawed at him. He frowned, reviewing the battle in his mind. Everything had gone according to plan. The fleet had executed their attacks flawlessly. The saturation bombardment was calculated down to the second. The minefield had sealed off any possible escape routes. So why did it feel like something was wrong? What are we missing? Then, a sudden shift in data made the observers go pale. Commander, something's not right. Huang snapped to attention, stepping toward the main monitor. What is it? Godzilla's body temperature is rising. A chill ran through the room. The artillery fire must have breached its outer shell, one officer speculated. Its internal reactor is probably going haywire. It's most likely dying. Commander Huang's eyes narrowed. Just temperature rise. Anything else? The analysts exchanged nervous glances. There's a possibility of an explosion. But we're over 20 nautical miles away, so it shouldn't affect the fleet. Some officers began nodding in relief. They had read about similar cases in Titan literature. When one of these creatures overheated, it typically signaled their demise. Some had even gone out in massive nuclear-like explosions, their energy sources destabilizing as they perished. If it does explode, debris might pose a minor risk, an analyst added. Shall we create some distance? Huang didn't hesitate. Do it. Destroyers, frigates, and submarines began retreating, cautiously maneuvering away from Godzilla's position. The creature had remained motionless for over 10 minutes. It had to be dead. Right. But then the sonar readings changed. The underwater turbulence had settled, allowing the unmanned submarines to gather more precise data on the creature's condition. And what they found turned their stomachs. How is this possible? The entire room fell silent. Surface deformation, 1.3%. Someone let out a strangled gasp. All that firepower, and we barely scratched it. But if it's not injured, then why is its temperature still rising? Panic set in. Numbers and readings flooded the screens, each one painting an increasingly horrifying picture. The water around Godzilla was boiling, no, evaporating. The temperature was climbing past 600 degrees. No, 700. It was still rising. This isn't a meltdown, an analyst whispered. It's doing this on purpose. Realization hit Commander Huang like a freight train. The pieces fell into place, the dissonance in his mind clicking together in terrifying clarity. The fleet hadn't made any mistakes. The operation had been executed perfectly. The problem was never with them. The problem was with Godzilla. A low, guttural sound echoed through the depths. A sound that sent a shiver through every man and woman in the command center. It had never been on the verge of death. It had been gathering energy. It had been preparing. The heat was not a sign of weakness, it was a sign of an impending attack. Notify the entire fleet. Huang's voice thundered through the command center, snapping everyone out of their stupor. Evacuate immediately. Get as far away from Godzilla as possible. Alarms blared. Crew members scrambled. Engines roared to life as ships reversed course at full throttle, desperate to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the monster. Read 40+ advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts. 0 comments 0 vote. Let there be light. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. Vast amounts of heat converge within its colossal form. Countless flames swirl, gathering and compressing, contained within the heart of its own body. Deep within, where few could ever fathom, the fusion light intensifies, glowing with an energy that defies nature itself. Godzilla's body, a living nuclear reactor, has already been pushed to its limits. Yet, even now, it continues to compress, the temperature rising higher and higher, reaching unthinkable extremes. The high-energy neutrons, birthed from this nuclear inferno, bombard the internal structure of its being, causing the very walls of its fusion core to melt and sublimate. For all its evolutionary brilliance, even Godzilla's body is not impervious to the forces at play within. Its reinforced metallic walls, strengthened by an immensely powerful magnetic field, struggle to contain the raging nuclear chaos. Plasma flames churn, striving to hold back the neutron storm, yet it is a losing battle. The energy within has surpassed all previous thresholds, and no amount of cooling fluid, no amount of reinforced carbon nanotubes, can halt the inevitable. It is simply too much. But Godzilla does not rely on just one fusion reactor. It has two. The first, its survival reactor, is its primary power source, the mechanism that fuels its every movement, its every breath, sustaining the sheer mass of its gargantuan form. This reactor, though formidable, is designed for endurance rather than intensity, outputting only a few terawatts at a time. The second, however, is an entirely different beast. The breath reactor, designed for pure, devastating destruction, operates on an entirely separate principle. Unlike the survival reactor, which extracts energy by heating metal and converting thermal energy into kinetic power, the breath reactor does not distribute its heat at all. It concentrates it, hoards it, refusing to release so much as an ounce of waste energy until the exact moment of ignition. Why? Because the sheer magnitude of its power is inconceivable. 300 terawatts. That is the upper limit of Godzilla's atomic breath, the level at which it can release destruction without suffering catastrophic self-inflicted damage. And yet, even that limit is no longer enough. The humans have adapted. They are clever, these small creatures. Too clever for their own good. They calculated the range of Godzilla's breath. They saw the city fall, saw the sheer devastation unleashed upon it, and from that, they determined the distance at which they could strike from safety. They think they are beyond its reach. Smart. But pointless. Because now, Godzilla will overclock. The 300 terawatt limit exists for one reason, self-preservation. It is the safe boundary, the threshold at which Godzilla can wield its power without melting itself from the inside out. But that safety net. It can be discarded. Overclocking is a technique Godzilla has always possessed, one it has used against foes far beyond its usual strength. It is the trump card, the ultimate gambit, the move that turns the tide. The price. Significant damage to its own body. The breath reactor, after overclocking, usually becomes unusable for an extended period. Usually. But things have changed. Godzilla has evolved. This new form, stronger, denser, more refined, has granted it the ability to compress its plasma beyond previous limitations. With this refinement comes control, a way to minimize neutron loss, a way to reduce radiation exposure to the reactor's inner walls. In other words, Godzilla can now overclock without rendering itself helpless in the aftermath. But first, the plasma density must be adjusted. In theory, it should take only 1 or 2 minutes. In practice, it has taken over 10. And for those 10 agonizing minutes, Godzilla has remained motionless. Not because it wishes to, but because it must. Adjusting plasma density is not a simple task, it is not something that can be mastered by mere instinct alone. There are instructions, yes. The system panel outlines the process. But knowing how something should work and making it work are two vastly different things. This is new. This is unfamiliar. And Godzilla is learning in real time. The process has been brutal. For those 10 minutes, the atomic breath reactor has been running at partial power, fluctuating wildly between tens and hundreds of terawatts. The heat has overwhelmed its body, melting portions of its inner walls, scarring it from within. The external attacks from the human fleet pale in comparison to the damage Godzilla has inflicted upon itself in these past few minutes. But now, it is done. Finally, the plasma density has been adjusted. The process has been mastered. The internal heat is no longer climbing out of control. And Godzilla is ready. On the ocean's surface, the Titan, which had been deathly still, begins to stir. Eyes glowing like molten fire, it locks onto the distant human fleet. They have fired upon it, rained destruction upon it, thinking themselves safe beyond the range of its breath. They are wrong. Godzilla's jaw unhinges, parting wide as it faces its distant foes. The air crackles, the very atmosphere trembling under the sheer energy building within. The ocean around it shifts, waves pulling away as an unseen force distorts reality itself. Then, at last, it releases. The atomic breath erupts from its maw, a cataclysmic lance of pure, concentrated destruction. It is unlike anything that has ever come before. The sky ignites. The sea vaporizes. And the world watches as Godzilla transcends its limits once more. 0 comments, 0 vote. Sending a message. Human POV. Godzilla opened its massive maw, its jagged teeth gleaming like obsidian under the harsh sun. It didn't need to see the enemy fleet. It could feel their presence, scattered like ants across the vast ocean. The monster's nictitating membrane slid over its eyes, a subconscious preparation for the destruction about to unfold. Then, the sky turned dark. Not the kind of darkness that creeps in at dusk, nor the kind brought by storm clouds. This was an absolute, all-consuming blackness, swallowing even the light of the sun. And at the heart of that void, an unearthly radiance blazed forth. A light beyond words, beyond comprehension, detonated across the horizon. At the command center, located 25 nautical miles away, confusion reigned. The sky had turned an impossible shade of black, and at its center, an extreme, blinding light burned with an intensity that defied reason. What is that? Someone shouted, but their voice was drowned out by the sheer force of the moment. Then, understanding dawned in an instant of sheer, primal terror. Get down. Too late. The ocean howled. The sky itself seemed to recoil. And then, the light consumed everything. A beam of unimaginable heat and fury, moving at over Mach 100, carved through the heavens. In less than a second, it had closed the 15 nautical mile gap, striking a destroyer near the rear of the fleet. Did it create towering waves? Did it boil the entire ocean? Did it summon a pillar of fire to the heavens? No. There was no time for theatrics. The plasma, concentrated to a level beyond human science, simply expanded, silently, mercilessly. Tokyo, over 300 miles away, had just seen the first light of day. Now, it was plunged into darkness once more. A fireball, more than 2 kilometers in diameter, blossomed in eerie silence. The destroyer was gone, not burning, not sinking, just erased. The shockwave, breaking the sound barrier, radiated outward. Anything within a 4-kilometer radius was condemned to instant annihilation. Ships crumpled like paper, their crews reduced to nothing but shadows imprinted on molten steel. Open corner bracket Godzilla POV. But to Godzilla, this was not enough. The attack did not end in a single moment. It continued, relentless and unyielding. Turning its head slightly, Godzilla adjusted the beam's trajectory. New explosions ripped through the fleet as several more fireballs bloomed, each marking another vessel's final moment. A towering inferno, kilometers high, stretched toward the heavens. It was no longer just an attack, it was a phenomenon. A living apocalypse. The sea, slow to react, finally surged in protest. Waves, dozens of meters high, rushed outward, carrying shattered steel, melting debris, and what remained of the unfortunate souls caught in the cataclysm. Normally, such waves would be enough to invoke terror, but here, they were nothing, mere ripples beneath the inferno splitting the sky. Hundreds of kilometers away, Tokyo Bay. People who had not yet evacuated stood frozen, staring at the horizon where a firestorm raged brighter than the sun. Some opened their mouths to speak, but no words came. What could be said? Across the world, in living rooms, war rooms, and command centers, millions watched the broadcast in stunned silence. They had expected a battle. They had expected resistance. Instead, they had witnessed a verdict. The screen flickered. Side mission, Mercy of the Monster King completed. Reward, 1 evolutionary upgrade for the power system. Would you like to use it now? The firestorm divided the sky in two, as if some divine hand had chosen to separate the heavens from the earth. But Godzilla, its massive form slowly submerging beneath the waves once more, was indifferent to the spectacle it had created. This wasn't about awe. It was about completion. The fleets of the smaller entities were no more. Godzilla glanced at the mission prompt on its HUD-like interface, an anomaly in itself, but one it had long accepted. More importantly, it felt the strain on its breath fusion reactor. That last attack had been excessive. The reactor, normally stable, had sustained damage. It wouldn't be usable for several days. A nuisance, but not an insurmountable one. Should it evolve underwater before surfacing? Godzilla considered this for a moment, but dismissed the idea. Human weapons were incapable of causing it any meaningful harm, and even without its breath reactor, it still possessed another source of power, the life-sustaining reactor. A lesser alternative, perhaps, but still formidable. At 3 to 5 terawatts of output, it wouldn't allow for city-erasing attacks, but it was more than sufficient to level entire districts. And with plenty of fuel left, it could fire tens of thousands of times before running dry. More than enough. With that in mind, Godzilla turned toward Tokyo. Read 40+ advanced chapters on my Patreon. Fallen_Stone Creators Thoughts.